Hmm.
They either knew from having the project training, they would have been briefed on the project that one of the children they were going to be interacting with was destined to grow up and tell the story of what happened to me in the project. But for all I know, that book may be a book that they are familiar with in their time, if it's that celebrated as a book. I don't know whether it is, but they certainly knew who I was. So they knew who I was.
Did you have a desire to want to stay there? It seemed to be very peaceful and serene.
Not really. Several of us who were in the projects kind of doubled back like I did and lived with our mom for a period of time as young adults. I frequently just wanted to go home to New Jersey in the 1970s. That was certainly one of the more pleasant environments to visit, and I was always treated very nicely there. In fact, the teleport was actually the wall of a conference room in that building. You just jumped through the wall, and we would pop into view at the microwave tower array, the microwave tower at the Lobo Overlook site in Continental Divide, north of Pagosa Springs, Colorado, near Wolf Creek Pass. By the time I was a fifth grader, I had time traveled so much and then doubled back to my ordinary time-space reference that time travel became kind of like a lucid dream that I could participate in. In other words, I relaxed and I enjoyed the experience. And I'm kind of proud of that because I was pretty much intimidated when we began. So there was a lot of growth there.
Understandable.
During those years. I've described how sometimes I felt like a yo-yo on the end of a string. Like somebody was doing a yo-yo trick and I was at the full extension of the possible. I knew that I was doing something very special, and I felt like the most privileged character on the planet.
That you are. Not very many people can say that.
Well, I was one of them, but I did relax and I did enjoy the bliss of going to another time and coming back safely. Just like you'd have a rapture experience, scuba diving and checking out the fish underwater and everything, and then coming back and drying off in the sun.
Oh, you treated it like a
Ultimately,
vacation.
I did enjoy a bliss experience from the immersion in another location in the time-space continuum.
Did you ever teleport to different dimensions? Different realities?
The whole question of dimensions is kind of clouded. I mean, everywhere where we are in the quantum hologram, that's where we are. So each of us is really always in one, at least semi-overlapping set of dimensions, but basically in one dimension. I didn't teleport or time travel with the other devices truly in an interdimensional sense. So, for example, when we spent the time in New Mexico and then doubled back to our alpha timeline in New Jersey, my dad never took me to New Mexico where I could see myself going around doing things. In fact, they were avoiding that happening. So I think that would have been truly interdimensional because in the linear A timeline that we'd broken off of when we would, for example, teleport to New Mexico, we did things in New Mexico, and then by teleporting back to the afternoon of the day we had jumped through the device in New Jersey, that time loop was essentially being unkinked on the linear B timeline. Do you see how that works?
Mm-hmm.
We jumped from our linear A to a linear B time loop that had opened up, but by jumping back to the afternoon of the day we left, we essentially tied off that time loop and it broke off from our linear A timeline. But we never crossed the lines over again, for example, by traveling physically in real time to some place we had teleported to. I did have a strange experience involving interdimensionality, though, and I think it's instructive.
Okay.
And that is when we jumped from mid-November 71 to the beginning of the summer of 1973. My dad actually took some sensitive military, these mailing tubes with sensitive military secrets in them. There were schematics of some of the U.S.'s most sensitive missile systems. That's what he explained to me when I asked him what was in the tubes. So we jumped from Curtiss-Wright, but when we arrived there, I thought it was still 1971, and when we visited Connie at the restaurant, she was angry at my father for not returning quickly as he said he would. And he said, Andy, come over here and tell Connie what year it is. And I said, what year it is? And he said, yeah. And I went over and said, what do you mean? It's 1971, isn't it? And Connie practically fell off her chair, because in fact it was around June 1st of 1973. So we rented a rental house, and during my first and second fact-finding trips to New Mexico, first by myself and then with my friend Dixie Karras, I found that house, I found the woman who had rented it to us, and everything regarding that summer of '73, living in White Rock in a summer sublet in a house there with my father. In fact, I told everybody who I met there in the shopping center, the Sherwood Shopping Center, that the Mexican restaurant was once a chicken place called Chicken Country. I told him that the Smith's grocery store was once a Gibson's department store because my dad had bought me clothes there when we first got there for the summer there at the beginning of the summer of '73. And the D'Angelo's Italian Deli was now like a branch office of Strategic Applications International Corporation, and then it was a web host company when I went back with Dixie. So I really reconnoitered White Rock and proved everything that was there. I even proved that the family that we had rented the house from, the father worked as the space coordinator for the engineering department at the Los Alamos National Labs, and I identified another house we stayed in earlier that he also owned in White Rock. Now, when I started living at that 20 Grand Canyon Avenue, or Grand Canyon Drive house there in White Rock, I had a stupid idea, but it actually ended up being an important experiment. My dad left for work, and I guess it was for a meeting, maybe to see Connie or whatever, and I was left back at the house, and I called my mother in New Jersey. I had asked Connie the day before what the area code for New Jersey was. And I knew what our 7-digit home phone number was. It was 539-4948. I still remember it. But I think the New Jersey area code was 201 or something like that, 212, something like that. I guess 212 is New York City. Yeah, I think it was 201, that part of New Jersey at that time. And so I asked Connie, and she gave me the area code for New Jersey. And I called my mother, and I said, "Mom, do you know who this is?" And she said, "Yes, this is my son Andrew. How could I not?" And I said, "Do you know where I am?" And she said, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm in New Mexico with Dad. We're on a secret government project. We teleported here. I'm taking special classes in a lab under the auxiliary gym at the Los Alamos Public High School," which I was thinking she was wondering where I was coming up with that. And she said, "No, you're not. You're right here in the house with me." And I think she said something like, "So don't play tricks on your loving mother," or something like that.
Holy cow, that's so cool.
And what happened was, when she received the call, I was in the house because this call was undertaken 3 weeks after we arrived in New Mexico via teleportation. We then spent the summer of '73 there, and then when we jumped back to New Jersey at the end of the summer of 1973, having pre-lived in the future, we returned back an hour later after we had left, around November 15th of 1971. Because I remember asking my dad when we were sleeping at the Albuquerque Holiday Inn, every night before we would go up to Sandia and teleport back home at the end of the summer, we were staying for one night because we had dropped our rental at the Holiday Inn. I remember I used to get up when it was all hot and I couldn't breathe. My dad was snoring, and I used to go into the bathroom, and rather turn the light on, I would turn the faucet on with cold water and cup my hands and drink from the spigot in the bathroom. And that's how I learned to kind of drink without making any noise where I'd wake my dad up when we were on the project together and sharing the same hotel room. So 3 weeks after we got back to the fall of 1971, my mother received that call, and I was in the house. So then when my dad came home from work, now when he came back from work in New Mexico, when the call was placed, he said, "Did you place a call from this house?" And I said, "Yeah, Dad, I did." And he goes, "I know, because Connie told me that you asked her what the area code was where we live." And he said, "You can't do that." And the funny thing is, he then tried to turn on the